Yeah.
Say, Phil.
Good afternoon. How you doing?
I'm good.
That's
Turn winter on us again, Phil.
I spit and stone when I left
Oh,
the
man.
house. It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Jay, we're in the second part 2
Yeah, the
of
signs.
our series on Jesus' signs.
Yep.
Signs, miracles that he had performed. And we're looking in John again in the 4th chapter. When the United States pulled troops out of Afghanistan, you
Yeah, I
remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
In 21.
Yeah.
The world was moved by the compassion of the people
Yeah.
there. They were running down the runway, hanging on to the
Wheels
wheel,
on the plane. Yes, it's bad, wasn't it?
and some of them were injured and some were killed. Trying to get out of Afghanistan.
Yes.
And as we took our people out, we had 13, I think, that were killed in the exit from Afghanistan. But as they clung to those airplanes when they took off from Kabul, I thought, boy, how lucky we are to live in the United States. They were hoping to flee the terror of the Taliban, however bad we think we got it, or good we think we got it.
Yeah.
It's better than other places. That desperation, we see the same thing in the scriptures today. We're looking at a fellow that was a government official, and you wouldn't expect this person to come and see Jesus for help. But he had been out milling around the countryside, and he had heard about him, and he had a desperately ill son. And so the news had begun to spread about Jesus and his ability to help those that were in need, and he was desperate for someone to help him. Common practice in some religions is to print out things that they'll be required to do in order to be a member of this religion or whatever. The reality is that there's nothing we can do. There's nothing we can be that would bring us into a relationship with God. But it's God calling us, and we must simply come to Christ in faith, and in His grace He responds. This second miracle, and I won't get too deep in it because you're going to be in it here waist deep in a minute. Jesus, we talk about His actions, though. A lot happened between the first miracle from last week and this week. Jesus went to Capernaum, then to Israel or to Jerusalem for Passover, and he was keeping this same tradition that was established in his youth. And this year, Jesus overturned the money changers' tables. That's a different.
Can you imagine the stir that caused?
Yeah, yeah. People in the countryside still talking about it.
Oh yeah, yes.
He had a conversation with in 3 John about
Nicodemus.
different things with
Yeah.
Nicodemus.
Yeah.
So he was a Pharisee
Right.
and leader in the Jewish faith.
Not one that you would think
Would look at him
would
or
look
talk
at
to
Jesus,
him.
but yes, would even consider.
Now it wouldn't be unusual for them to talk to Jesus, but they would do it in an open public forum.
Yeah.
Where everybody not go to him in private.
Right.
But yet Nicodemus did.
Right.
So and then he went to one of John the Baptist's burial or baptismal sites
Right.
after that. And then he encountered a Samaritan woman.
Let's go back to the baptismal
Okay.
site. I don't know if I ever remembered that John the Baptist baptized anywhere other than around the Jordan River. But this was up between Jerusalem
Yeah.
and Cana, and in the area around Samaria, which is probably 50 or 60 or 70 miles from Jordan River. Well, quite a ways from where he was.
Yeah.
His normal base was. His normal base was around the Jordan River, but he was up there on that part of Israel.
Right.
baptizing people.
Which is unusual.
Yeah,
That movement, we don't know why he went there,
yeah, but
other than he might have had people hot and heavy after him
yes,
in
yeah, I
Jerusalem.
think so.
We know that that was becoming a concern. Then he ran into the Samaritan woman
Right,
at the well.
right.
And he continued north and got an enthusiastic welcome when he come back into Galilee.
Mhm.
So part of the purpose of the signs that we talked about last week was to introduce Jesus as to who he was to his own disciples
Right,
and
right,
also the servant class.
right.
All the signs that he performed were to point to who he was. It may have been about somebody else. Today it's going to be about, you can look, maybe it's about this man, maybe it's about his family, maybe it's about his sick son. And then my thinking is, none of it's about that. It's about Jesus,
Jesus,
and who
right.
he is and,
Exactly.
and what this tells us.
Yeah.
What Nicodemus said to him was true. That no one could do the things that he had done, could perform those signs unless God was with him.
Right with it. Yeah.
So let's look at Scripture. It's good study
Let
here.
me borrow your glasses. I left
Okay.
mine in the
Yeah,
truck
sure.
again today, Phil. We're gonna take care of this tonight. We're looking at John chapter 4, verses 46 to 47, and you've already talked about the Samaritan lady, the Nicodemus. Now, we know that those two people were people that Jesus would they had to come to him. Well, in other words, Nicodemus was a man that Jesus probably didn't like Jesus, but yet he felt it necessary to come to Jesus. Jesus went to the Samaritan woman, which was totally opposite of what a Jew would do. When the Jews went from Jerusalem to the Sea of Galilee up in that area, they walked around Samaria because they didn't want to be close to the Samaritans, those half-breed Samaritans. What did Jesus do? Jesus went up and talked to her
Waited in there among them.
and asked if she could get him some water. Well, that's nothing that no other Jew would have done. I think what these two encounters show us, as well as the one today, is that Jesus came to minister to everybody, whether it was a friend, a foe, an outcast like the Samaritan woman, or as we're saying today, actually a ruler, a royal. It's called a royal official, who could have been a Jew, and if he was, he was a turncoat, and the Jews would hate him because of that. He could have been kin to the king, or he could have been a Gentile who had turned against the Jews also. So he was somebody that most Jewish people wouldn't give the time of day to.
And you know, most of his friends, so-called friends, were probably just his family members.
Exactly.
Because those people who didn't have a government job,
Right.
they would think of him as, uppity.
Yeah, uppity or a traitor or whatever.
Yeah.
So let's see what John
Sell
writes.
out.
Yeah, sell out, exactly right. It says in chapter 4, verses 46, 47, he went again to Canaan of Galilee, he's talking about Jesus, where he had turned the water into wine. There was a certain royal official whose son was ill at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea into Galilee, he went to him and pleaded with him to go down and heal his son, since he was about to die. So the stage is set here. Jesus has gone back up to Galilee and probably around Nazareth, or in Canaan area. And not only does Jesus go there, but somebody as far away as Capernaum, which is 20 miles, which would be like us from E-Town, southern part of E-Town to Bonneville. That's about 20 miles. You got 5 miles each exit down through there. That far away already knows Jesus is in Galilee. They don't have phones.
They don't have
taxi
Facebook.
cab. They don't have Facebook. They don't have any of that stuff, TikTok, whatever. But he knows that Jesus is back in Galilee. Now, so he when he finds out he's there, it says that a certain royal official, now as we said earlier, we don't know exactly what his role was, but he was appointed by the king over the area of Galilee. And the king was in charge. Antipas was in charge of that area, ruled Galilee from 4 B.C. to 39 A.D. So he was in rule there the entire time Jesus was ministering. And this royal official was one of his appointees, and from Capernaum. So it's 20 miles from where Jesus was. The man heard that Jesus was in Galilee and went and pleaded with him to come down and heal his son. And the writer talks about the word used for pleading there is not, please come down, or would you, why don't you come down, come on down with me and look at my son. It's a pleading, it's a begging, it's you've got to come, my son's about to die.
Desperation in his voice. Desperation.
Desperation. He was pleased. He begged and pleased to come down and heal my son because he's about to die. And we don't know very much about the son. We don't know how old he is, except we know that in some later verses that he called him his son, his boy, instead of his son. I think the writer alludes to the fact that maybe he's a younger child because it calls him boy rather than son. But we don't know. We do know, the only thing we learn about him is, from later verses, he had a fever. That's all we know. Of course, back in that day and time, if you had a fever for very long, it was serious. There wasn't anything to do about it. Mm-hmm. And the writer wraps these first few verses up like this. This nobleman, this royal official, was out of options. I'm sure they had a doctor in that area of Capernaum that had done what they could for him. But his son was at home, and he was seriously ill. The father's need was so great that he was willing to overlook the societal differences or barriers between himself and Jesus. He knew Jesus. He knew Jews hated him. Wasn't any question about that. He didn't know Jesus hated him because he hadn't been encountered with him, but he knew Jews would hate him. And we've talked before about this, Phil. If you know somebody doesn't like you and you need something really bad and you go to them and ask them for help, that's humbling yourself, right? That is really, he had to humble himself to take that trip from Capernaum, which is 20 miles away, up to see Jesus. Now the question I have, Phil, there is, what would you do? You had a son in the bed. You think there might be some help 20 miles away. Do you leave your son, or do you send a servant to go do the job for you, to talk to Jesus?
Well, we see it both ways in the New Testament. Some would send a servant, come, Jesus, come, and others would touch the hem of his garment. Would do it themselves. And either way, it was effective.
Don't you think he was in such a desperate situation that he didn't want to trust anybody else going and finding Jesus?
Right.
He wanted to do it himself. He wanted to be the one to ask Jesus.
I think it shows, talk about the difference in elevation there between Capernaum and...
About 1,400 foot drop.
1,400 foot drop over 20 miles. So it's uphill all the way. Mm-hmm. This is not an easy trip.
No.
And he sets out going, man.
I think he thought, if this doesn't work, it's going to be because I failed, not because I didn't know what my servant said to Jesus. Mm-hmm. I want to go myself, plead my own case to the servant. If my son dies while I'm gone, he's in desperate shape anyway. Yeah. So he takes off and heads off for Galilee, for Capernaum. For Cana, land of Canaan. Despite his wealth and his connections to the king, and he had all the best of doctors that they had at that time, there wasn't any cure for what his son had. But he humbled himself and got to Jesus and asked him to come down and to heal his son. It took some faith to even start out on that trip on his part. He had heard enough about Jesus to know that Jesus might be able to do something. It's the only chance he had. So we see now that he's gotten to Galilee and he's asked Jesus to come heal his son because he's about to die.
Yeah. Why might people, I don't know what to say, why might they hesitate to take their problems to Jesus this day and time? Why do people not feel the need to take their needs to Jesus?
Yeah, same thought I had is if we had the faith that this man had. Now, one of the reasons is we have so many doctors available now and so many opportunities, and we see people go to the hospital and get healed. A lot of times we, as believers, we believe it was because of what God did, when God intervened.
Yeah.
But if we had that kind of faith, even today, and there are people today who refuse to go to doctors. You know that.
Yeah.
There's families that refuse to take their child to a doctor. They pray about it. Sometimes the child lives, sometimes the child dies. But this guy had faith. If we had faith in our walk with Christ like he did, how much more could we accomplish? Whether it be taking care of a family member or just in our daily walk with God, how much more could we get accomplished if we had the faith this man had?
I think a lot of times, like you say, we spend our time trying to correct situations that can't be corrected by us or a loved one, but yet nobody but God can make a solution.
Yeah.
And we find that all the time. In the next verses, let's look here. It says, Jesus told him, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will not believe." "Sir," the official said to him, "come down before my boy dies." "Go," Jesus told him, "your son will live." The man believed to what Jesus said to him and departed. Here we see belief. There's somebody that was unfamiliar with Jewish religion other than it's what some other people believed. And he had heard about Jesus. Jesus told him, it says, "Unless y'all see signs." Well, the fact that Jesus told him, this was the guy that he had heard about at the wedding feast. He had turned water to wine in front of people.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't address the head waiter. He didn't address the groom. He didn't address his mother. It didn't draw anything to himself. But it was no longer an option.
Mm-hmm.
I told you, I believe he prayed there.
Mm-hmm.
And God said, it's time.
Mm-hmm.
So the word had traveled, and it says that he received a public welcome here.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But the man's pleading, it drew additional attention to him. Mm-hmm. And Jesus talked to him about the importance of seeing a miracle.
Right.
It wasn't important, was it?
Mm-mm.
Who's he addressing there when he says, "Unless you people see signs and wonders"?
Don't you imagine by this time that every time Jesus steps foot outside of his house or wherever he's staying, that he has a crowd around him? I think he's talking about everybody that was around. It was in hearing sight.
Yeah, I think anywhere he was around Capernaum
Mm-hmm.
had probably gotten that way
Mm-hmm.
pretty quick.
Yeah, it hadn't been that long. Really?
He couldn't move about inconspicuously,
No.
although he had up to this point pretty much. And he got a lot more attention. The words that he spoke here just weren't meant specifically for the Roman official, but rather for all that were gathered there.
Mm-hmm.
He had a message for all of them. We think of signs and wonders. Well, I think of that, and Paul used it, or it's used in another place in New Testament. I don't remember if it's Paul or irregardless. When they talk about signs and wonders, we think of things that are supernatural acts
Right.
that occurred that you don't see every day. And crowds were increasingly seeing him as a healer.
Right.
He used some magic to achieve what results he got. But the fact is, even with that misunderstanding persisting, the facts were he wasn't performing any sleight of hand magic. Jesus is able to heal and perform these other miracles because the Father was with him. Nicodemus knew that.
Yes.
We don't see it here, but he went away somewhat convinced, didn't he, that he was the Messiah. You will not believe. Now that's in contrast to the Samaritans.
Right.
When he had the conversation with the woman at the well, what'd she do? She went and told everybody she saw and said, "Who come see this man that's told me everything that I've done." She told him. He told her about her husbands and all of her illicit affairs and things. But Jesus,
they believe strictly on what she told them about Jesus.
But Jesus knew that the crowd that was there would never believe unless they saw some kind of miracle. But it wasn't the most important thing. His connection with the Father. And it wasn't the case with the government official. He didn't need to see a miracle.
No.
He said he begged him. He pleaded with him. He's on his knees. He's saying, you've had sick kids, and I've had sick kids, and it gets to a point, nothing you seem to do is working. You get real close to God real quick, and say, God, I need your intervention for something bad happens to my child. Well, what Jesus tell him? He didn't show him, didn't put him on the big thing, didn't put a big stage on for the other people there, did he? He said, go, your boy's going to live. Go, your son's going to live. And it wasn't a request, it was a command. He wanted him to go. He wouldn't be in the same mental state that he was when he came as he left. How would he have left that conversation?
I wonder if it doesn't say it at all. Did he immediately leave, or did he say, don't you want to go with me? I'll take you right to him. You think he hesitated any at all, or said,
I don't think he did.
Are you sure?
I don't think he did, because I think, we have these Jesus moments.
Yeah.
When we know Jesus has got his hand in the middle of something.
Yeah.
I think he had a Jesus moment there. And
he
he knew when he said go, it was done.
It was over, right?
It was over with. The man believed.
The man believed what Jesus
He had heard all this stuff, and when Jesus said that, he believed him.
Now, that's faith, right? He didn't see a thing. He did not see a thing happen. He just heard Jesus say it, and he had the faith.
Yeah.
He didn't have to have a sign, as you had already talked about, like the other people.
What about Mary and Martha whenever Lazarus died?
He said, if you'd been here, you wouldn't have died.
If you'd been here.
Yep.
Was that different?
I think it was a little bit, yes, I think it was different.
If you'd had a little more faith, he might not have died to begin with. Belief, it's a major theme in John's writings. We see it about 100 times in his writings. But Jesus found genuine faith in this nobleman. The gravity of his situation was evident in his tone. He was pleading with him. He was begging with him. And when Jesus heard the pleading of this royal official, to come and do something that only he could do. He carried out an amazing miracle, not by a touch, but by speaking it
Speaking
so.
to- from a distance.
He took Jesus' word, went on his way, and like you said, that's a picture of faith.
Yep. Yep.
And we'll see he's rewarded.
Yep. Let me borrow your glasses again. Let's look at the last verses here.
What's the difference between believing God and believing in God?
You can believe that God is who he is, the creator and so forth, but I guess when you believe in him, you put your trust in him, you put your faith in
Yeah,
him. You
exactly.
depend on him, right?
Exactly.
Instead of depending on yourself.
There's a difference.
There is a difference.
There's a marked difference in that. This man demonstrated belief in God. And he went away believing God. It's a marked difference.
Does our belief, well, that's just not the right way to put it, does our faith in God grow as we mature in our Christian walk?
Sure, because we see these things all the time.
Yeah.
We see what happened here. We'll be praying for an individual and we see God put his hand on them, heal them. You know, we've got it in our own life. We don't have to look far, do we?
Nope. Nope.
Where, you know, people tell you, you got so much time.
Yeah.
They don't know.
We see it in accidents when there's no way you can walk away from it.
Yeah.
And your whole family does. We see it. And every time something like that happens, your faith grows, matures. But also, as we're going to see in these verses, other people's faith can grow and mature based on what happens in their lives or what happens in somebody else's life. And they find out about what has happened.
One important aspect of that is sharing it.
Yes, and that's what we'll see what
Yeah.
the royal servant or royal man here
Yeah.
did here. 51 through 54, chapter 4, John. While he was still going down, now he's going back from Cana to Capernaum, and when they say down, it's because it's
Downhill now.
to start with. He's coasting downhill. His servants met him, saying that his boy was alive. He asked them at what time he got better. Yesterday at 1 p.m, the fever left him. They answered. The father realized this was the very hour at which Jesus had told him, "Your son will live." So he himself believed, along with all his household. Now this was also the second sign Jesus performed after he came from Judea to Galilee.
Wow.
Guys walking downhill towards the Sea of Galilee.
He's not there yet.
Now, but do you think the writer asked this question, did he run faster? Well, I wrote this question, did he run faster going towards Cana, or did he run faster coming back to Capernaum?
I'd say he's at a more relaxed pace.
Going home? Might be. He wanted to get there quick because he knew his son didn't have much time to live. But either way, he was happy to be walking back down this trail, and as you said, with the faith he showed, there wasn't any question what he was going to find when he got there.
Yeah.
But his servants, I'm sure the wife sent them back and said, "Go find him, tell him he's well."
Once again, the servants.
But the servants didn't know what had happened. The wife didn't know, the mother, but she said, "Go tell him, because I know he's worried about his son." Well, they met together somewhere between Capernaum and the Sea of Galilee and Judea, Cana of Judea, and they said, "Your son is alive." So he asked them, what time did it happen? And they told him about 1 o'clock the afternoon before. We know that was a full day trip one way, so they were probably the next day was when this happened. And they said about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and he gets to thinking about when it happened, and that's the same time that Jesus said, "Go home, your son's alive." And it says with that, he believed. He didn't have to see his son. He didn't have to figure out, well, you sure it was the right time? Maybe his fever just broke. He believed exactly what Jesus had told him would happen did at that very same time. Can you imagine his feeling then his elation, the writer talks about him weeping for joy, jumping up and down. Now, I bet you at that point in time, his pace did pick up. He wanted to get home and hug his son at that point in time. I bet his pace did pick up on the rest of the way down the hill toward the Sea of Galilee. Then it says the fever left him. It didn't say he got a little bit better. He's looked like he's on the mend. He was well. The fever left us quicker than it even came. Then it says that he himself believed along with his whole household. Can you imagine the story he had to tell when he got back and his son was sitting around the table? They were all sitting around, all of his family, and he said, "This is what happened. I did see Jesus. And at exactly the time that I saw him, and he said, 'Go home, your son's alive,' that's when you got well."
Yeah.
And he believed in Jesus.
Go home, your son's going to live.
Your son's going to
And
live.
at that very hour, you started getting better, or your fever left you.
Yeah. He talks about this being the second sign Jesus performed. Well, we know that Jesus had already been to Capernaum and gone to Jerusalem and talked to Nicodemus and met with this Samaritan woman. A lot of things that happened. I think he's talking about the second sign that happened in the land area around Canaan.
Well, it's either that, or do you think the other signs in between here, the woman at the well, they were individual things.
Right.
They weren't in a public setting.
You're true. That's exactly right.
I kind of think this is called the second sign because it was so public.
Okay.
You know, he's got a crowd following him.
Yeah, and really the cleaning out the temple wasn't a sign. That was just Jesus going in there and whipping somebody's, taking his belt out and turning over tables.
Yeah.
He said, "Oh, you're not going to do this in my Father's house."
Yeah.
Which to me was a big announcement. When he said before his time hadn't come, when he did that and this is digressing, but when he did that in the temple, he knew his time had come. Didn't he? He knew that he was supposed to be doing exactly what God wanted him to do. And at that point in time, he was cleaning out the temple. But so the Father did what we as believers should do. Yeah. When God does something for us, we see a miracle in our lives or in anybody's life, we share about it with other people, whether they're ones involved or just people, bystanders standing around. They need to know that, as we say, this was a God thing. Yeah. And this was definitely a God thing. He healed the boy. And the thing about it is, the writer talks about this being, there was two different events, other events in the Bible that talks about Jesus healing someone from a far distance away. And they mentioned that one of them was the soldier servant who was healed, and a young daughter of a Canaanite woman was healed from a distance. Only 3 examples of Christ being able to do that. Now, Christ could have done it any time he wanted to. And we know that there was probably other times when it happened when it wasn't written, because John says you couldn't write, if you wrote down everything he did, all the books in the world wouldn't hold what Jesus did. But those 3 times are when these miracles affirm Jesus' supernatural abilities and show that he's not limited by things we are, the time and space. He can heal someone anywhere he wants to in the world at any time. So the guy was healed. His faith was, his trust, his belief in God was well founded. The boy who was on the brink of death was now alive and fully well. The writer talks about the fact that when we get to a point where this father was, he was not in control. There was not a thing he could do for his son. I'm sure they tried everything they knew. And when he realized he wasn't in control, he knew he needed somebody else. The only person he knew of to turn to was God. When we get to that point in our life, it's a good feeling. We turn everything over to him. Now, we don't know how it's going to turn out, but we trust him. Then that's faith. Same faith that this guy exhibited. And what we need to do then, as we said before, Don't do like he did. Do like he did. Tell other people about it. He told his family. He didn't have to go out telling everybody else, but I'm assuming that more than just his family heard about this in the area of Capernaum.
His faith, the faith that he had in him was bolstered by what occurred.
Yeah.
Our faith should be bolstered by the things that occur in our life. And not necessarily just ours, but me from what happens in your life. From that rollover that your daughter had and all those kids coming out unmarked. Amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's God's hand being on that. And we can go through situation after situation around the church, the different ones.
Yes.
You have to tell your family about it.
Yes.
You have to tell your friends about it. The other thing that struck me about this passage, when did it occur? When did the healing occur? It's when he spoke it.
We spoke.
It was done.
Didn't have to touch him. They didn't have to touch Jesus.
He didn't have to go running back across the countryside. On task for us. He is on task for us. He is on time for us. And he's in the know about everything going on in our lives. Why try to beat a dead horse? Turn things over to him. And when you do that, I think your family's influenced. His family had to be influenced by his faith.
They said that they all believed. I'm sure they did.
Yeah. So what do we do from this study? What actions we need to take? Pray, thank the Lord at the end of each day, for his faithfulness to us, and try to start taking each day, start your day trusting him that he's going to provide whatever you need for the day. We know Jesus cares for us, loves us. He knows our concerns before we even take them to him.
Yeah.
And he acts like this passage here for all.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you are, what you are. Everybody's the same. You come to Jesus, your palms up. Everybody's the same. All we got to do is believe. When we have things occur like he had, praise God. Praise God. Let others know. Share. Take a moment with someone and share your experiences. Share what God's done in your life. And you'll be rewarded as well as a person who is being healed, or whose family is being healed, or who's been suffering for years and is now out of their oppression. In this time and culture that we have today, we wouldn't think of a person from a king's court seeking out someone like Jesus for help. This news had begun to spread, and it spread quick. And we think of where it spread from. The servants, from the winemaking, and his disciples. Okay, so it's pretty raw. It's coming pretty close, isn't it?
Yep.
But how did he go to Jesus? He went to him in a desperate faith attempt to get his son healed.
Yep.
We all get those periods of desperation in our life where we need a touch from Jesus.
Yep.
Watch how he did it,
That's right.
and we'll see him act on it. We enjoyed bringing this study to you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you can join us next week, and we'll look at the third session in Jesus' signs. Thanks for joining us.